Chapter 3. If Hugh Pine had been the only one of his kind around, maybe nothing more would have happened. Although a porcupine passing himself off as a human being and wandering around on the Surrey Road is in itself enough of an event to be remarked upon. But he wasn't, not by any means. He was the biggest porcupine around, and he was the cleverest. But there were a few hundred others, 384 at that particular time to be exact, all living near the bay and in the woods surrounding Rotworth. And they were all in danger of losing their lives because of the cars that didn't stop until it was too late. Every time that happened, there was another dead porcupine. The porcupines became very frightened of the terrible cars racing along the road, and one evening, when the moon was full and the wind still, they all met in the glade close to Surrey, where porcupines have been meeting in times of stress ever since the world was still a place of dreams. Hugh Pine didn't go to the meeting, though he had heard about it. Nothing had been bothering him lately, and he hated crowds. He just sat in his tree and looked at the tops of the aspens and the birches and the tamaracks below him and felt peaceful. The moon was round and tinged with yellow and orange, and the forest was dipped in whites and blues, and he had had a lot to eat that day. Everything was just the way he liked. In fact, it was even better, for the loggers had brought out a big pecan pie that afternoon, and Hugh Pine had made away with half of it. The sweet taste was still in his mouth. Hugh Pine was happy, but he wouldn't stay happy long. Suddenly, there was a scratching at the pine's bark, and he heard the funny tinkling sound porcupines make when they rustle their quills. Hugh Pine stayed very still. Maybe they would go away. But the noise only got worse. They were shouting and banging on the tree. Hugh Pine snorted. He began to climb down, slowly and ponderously, snorting all the way from the highest branch to where the trunk of the pine leveled with the ground. "Yes?" he asked, and faced the 3 porcupines who had been hollering and shouting.
"We are the committee,"
the 3 porcupines said. "Very nice," Hugh Pine said. "How very good of you to be the committee, and how very good of you to come and see me. Why don't you go away?" He began to climb the tree again, but the committee humped around and set up such a din that Hugh Pine grunted hopelessly and slid down again. "Yes?" "We had an emergency meeting," the biggest of the 3 porcupines said, "and we discussed the calamity." Hugh Pine ripped a piece of bark off the tree and put it in his mouth. He closed his eyes and began to chew. "You know what the calamity is, don't you?" the porcupine asked. Hugh Pine swallowed. "No," he said. "We are dying out. We are getting knocked over and driven over and smashed." Aha! Hugh Pine tried to sound uninterested, but he did care, and the care showed in his voice. "You know the Spike twins?" the other porcupine asked. "The 2 fellows who moved into the glade behind the 9 birches across the road?" "Yes." "A van got them. Batch! Batch! They are in the ditch now, and the ravens are eating them." "No." "Yes." "And do you know the lady who lives where the brook splits, who can whine so beautiful when the moon is up?" "I've heard her." "You won't hear her again. She ventured into the road the day before yesterday, and plop!" "No." "Yes." "And do you know the big bashful fellow with the gray streak around his mouth, the one with the very long quills who lives—" "He is my brother," Hugh Pine said. "I'm sorry." "Tell me," Hugh Pine said, and stopped chewing. "A big truck," the other porcupine said, "yesterday. This must be a bad time of the year for us, a particularly bad time. The truck came rushing down the hill, and your brother hadn't quite made it to the other side, and vopsh! He should have worn a hat, Hugh Pine said sadly. You should all wear hats, and not just any sort of hats, but red hats, big red hats. And you should walk upright, and you should walk on the left side of the road so you can see the cars coming, and you must wave. People wave back. People are all right. Yes, the smallest porcupine said, but their cars aren't. The cars go so fast that, whoosh, there they are, and you are underneath them, and you are dead. I am not dead, Hugh Pine said. I wear a red hat, and
We know!
All the porcupines said at the same time. But we can't do that, you see. We tried, but we can't. We don't have hats, and even if we had hats, You are stupid, Hugh Pine said.
We are,
the 3 porcupines said. But you aren't, and you must help us. How? Asked Hugh Pine. We don't know. You know. He sat down, and the 3 porcupines sat down opposite him. They stared at each other, the committee waiting while Hugh Pine thought. The littlest porcupine had very shiny whiskers and dark, round, soft, small ears. Hugh Pine looked at her, but he didn't see her. He was thinking. Hours passed. The moon went away, and the sky lit up with the first rays of the great sun. Right, Hugh Pine said. Go away now. Perhaps I know something. I'll go and talk to the people. Not to all of them, to one of them. I'll talk to Mr. McTosh. The loggers often mention him. He is very important because he owns the post office. I don't know what the post office is, but I'll find out. I know some words the people use. And I know Mr. McTosh. We have waved at each other. He looks a little like us. He isn't as big as the other people, and he hasn't got a neck, and he has white whiskers, and he even wears a hat. His hat is red like mine. I'll go and talk to him and see what I can do. Are you quite sure you can't learn to walk upright and walk on the left of...
Quite sure.
The 3 porcupines said and got up. Hugh Pine looked at the big white pine. He badly wanted to climb it and sit in its top and fall asleep. The 3 porcupines had left. He heard them moving away from him in the undergrowth. Hugh Pine sighed and walked to the road. He put on his hat, got on his hind legs, and began to walk to Rotworth. It was a long way, and he walked all morning, waving at the people in the cars who greeted him. When he got to Rotworth, he looked into all the buildings until he found Mr. McTosh. He sighed once more and went in. End of chapter 3.